Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. With 2022 just starting, you might want to think to yourself, you want to start programming. Hopefully within this video I will be able to help you decide on which career path in programming you should take and what are the best resources that you can find in order for you to jumpstart your programming adventure. When it comes to programming, there's a lot of different platforms that you might think to yourself you want to start in. You might decide you want to start with web programming, mobile, desktop application, so on and so forth. In this video, we're going to be focusing on web. We're going to be breaking down into front-end and back-end and the different technology that exists there, as well as the best resources for you to get started. So basically within web, we have two types of technologies, or basically two career paths that we can actually take. We have the front-end and we have the back-end. But what does this mean? What does front-end mean? What does back-end mean? So basically front-end means the user interface. In essence, it means what is the user gonna see? What is the user gonna be interacting with? It's gonna be the two types of this. So for example, if I see a form, it's gonna be representative of the text fields, the images, the title, the buttons, the validation on those fields. If I'm entering the email correctly, it has the right email characters. Or for example, if I'm entering a mobile number, that mobile number is the right length, it has the right country code, so on and so forth. So all of this feature in the front end, as well all of the designs that we see on our website. For example, the menu, the banners, the images, the location of all of these is all part of the front end stuff. On the other hand, the back end stuff is also responsible for the logic, or how everything's gonna fit together. So for example, if I have a form and I click on a button to register, the front end is also gonna, all it's gonna do is basically delegate this information from the front end to the back end. And basically the back end is going to take this take this information and process it, either saving it somewhere in the database, send an email to someone, confirm the registration, so on and so forth. So we can think of the back end as the brains behind our web application, and the front end is just the interface that the user interact with. So both of them are equally important, because if you have a really nice front end but the back end doesn't do anything, it's a useless website. And if, for example, if we have a really great back end but a very poor front end, that does not invite the user to interact with it, so the user are not going to be able to use it. So both are very important and both have the same level of priority when it comes to developing any application. So once we have understand the difference between the front end and the back end, we're going to right now jump into what are the front end technologies that we're going to be needing, how we can actually get started in those, and then we're going to do the same thing for the back end stuff. I know all of these terminologies, front end, back end, APIs, servers, can be confusing. So I'm going to try my best to breaking them as much as we can, specifically when it comes to the technology and the term that we're going to be using. So since we're going to be starting on the front end, we're going to be delving deep into the mainly three technologies that we're going to be needing in order for us to get started with the front end stuff. So as we can see here, front-end stuff is built on three main components. The first one is going to be HTML, the second is going to be CSS, and the third is going to be JavaScript. So what does this mean and why do we need them? So we can think of HTML as a skeleton, or for example, we can think about it as the layout of our web page. So for example, when we go to a page and we want to register, we can see how the fields are being laid out, and we can see, for example, where the buttons are. So these fields, these buttons, the text that we can see is all HTML. It's basically the foundation of our web page. It's going to be the main skeleton that we're going to be designing, and we're going to be adding some functionality to. So without anything, the main component here is HTML. We can have HTML without having CSS and JavaScript, but we cannot have a JavaScript without HTML. We cannot have CSS without HTML. So HTML is going to be the foundation. It's going to be the web page that we're going to be actually, or it's going to be the canvas that we're going to be building our website upon. So that's why it's really important. CSS means cascading style sheet, and basically it's going to give us the ability to give some coloring, give some theming, give some design to our web application. It will enable us to build a nice foundation for it. For example, we can give it our own colors, we can put design some the layout of the pictures of a slider, where do we want to put the menu, how do we want, for example, the button to look. For example, if the user input the wrong validation, what color do we want to input the errors for? All of this is part of the CSS. And lastly, it's going to be the JavaScript. So the JavaScript means here is going to be, for example, it's a programming language for the front end. So in other words, for example, if a user try to submit a form and the validation is not there, how do you want this web page to interact? Do you want, for example, to prompt a pop-up to the user telling the user that there is some missing information, or you want, for example, to have some kind of a red borders around the field which is missing information? Do you want the text to be like in certain font, or do you want the text to be in certain colors? I'm oversimplifying here just for the sake to understand what is its functionality, but in essence it's a programming language for the front end in order for us to give it some logic and to make sure that it actually achieve what we want to achieve, specifically in the term of the user interaction with the application or with the web page. So that's why it's really important to have these three. So as we said, we have HTML, which is going to be the foundation and the building block for our application. Secondly, it's going to be CSS, which is going to be used in order for us to actually build the application and give it the nice theming, giving the nice color, nice background, where are we going to position every field. And lastly, it's going to be the JavaScript, our front-end logic and programming language in order for us to design the user interface and basically give it the functionality that we want from the user perspective. So for example, validation, making sure that all of the fields are there, so on and so forth. To learn front-end, there's a lot of resources out there. There's going to be free ones and there's going to be paid ones. So let's start with the free. On Coursera, on YouTube, and on Udemy, there is a lot of courses there that we can actually take for free without paying a single penny. And these are all great courses. Similarly, there's also paid courses on Udemy, which I highly recommend. You can find all of these links in the description down below. Now that we have understood what this HTML is, what CSS is, what JavaScript is, how do they fit together, and we have got the grasp of the basics of front-end development, the next step is to actually understand and work with a framework. And the top three main frameworks that currently exist are AngularJS, Vue, as well as React. And these three main JavaScript frameworks are the foundational block for basically any current or any upcoming web applications. These three are the most commonly used web framework exist in the market today, as of today. So React, Angular, and Vue.js. All of these three frameworks are JavaScript based, and all of them rely on the latest versions of JavaScript. And all of these are always up to date, and basically every few months there's a new version with the new features being released into it. Based on the job market that you are currently exist in or currently located in, you can choose one of these frameworks. I highly recommend doing your research on these three frameworks. For example, check in your area, or for example in the job market that you are in, what is the most common framework being used. Check, for example, what is the salary range for this framework. Check, for example, if you're interested in web, in freelancing, for example, check, for example, the market range for them. As well, check the learning curve. If, for example, it's going to take you a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, so on and so forth. So do your research before you can choose any of these frameworks. But once you have understood one framework, it's much more easier for you to jump between one to another. So again, before you start, make sure you do your own research, make sure that which one you want to follow and study, and then based on that, if you, for example, a few months down the road, you can decide to move to another framework, it's much more easier for you because basically all of them share the same foundation and all of them are based on JavaScript. So it's much more easier for you to switch from one to another. Now let's see some of the resources that actually exist for these three frameworks. I have specified on the screen here some of the resources that you can find for React, Angular, and Vue.js. One link is going to be free and the other one is going to be paid. So I highly suggest going through them, check which one is best for you, and actually go through with the course. So after we have discussed this basically covers the aspect of the front-end development. Right now we're going to be jumping into back-end development. Now that we have covered front-end technology, it's time for us to understand back-end technology. So as we said previously, back-end means the logic or the brain of our web application. It means, for example, when we do anything on the front-end, like fill a form, log in, register, buy something online, add stuff to the shopping cart, for example, add stuff to our favorites, all of those logics are being handled by the backend. And basically backend break down into 4 different categories. And please note that this is oversimplifying the logic of a backend for us to understand what actually happens in the backend. So first is databases. Databases are basically where we store our information. So for example, if I register on a website and I put my name there and my personal information, where is this information is going to be stored? It's going to be stored in the database. And basically the information in the backend, its main purpose is for it to be stored somewhere. And the backend will be responsible for pulling this information from the front end, make sure that it's a valid information, and then putting it back into the database. That's the first thing. For example, second thing, if I want to log into a website, and once I log in, I want to pull all of my information and my personal preferences, the backend will be responsible to do all of that. So once the backend will be able to authenticate me as a user, it is going to go to the database, check the information that belongs to me, and then put this information to the front end for it to be displayed. So as we can see here, database is a very crucial part of our web application where we're going to be storing all of our information there. Second is APIs. Basically APIs here, I'm oversimplifying, is going to be responsible for handling all of the requests. So for example, let's say I have my button for user registration, and once I click on the register button, that front end is going to send a request to the API. And for example, in this API, it's going to pull all of the information from the front end. And once it pulls all of this information, it's going to do some processing on them, making sure that it's valid, for example, make sure that there is no duplicates in my data, there is no missing field, so on and so forth. And once it makes sure that all of this information is valid, then it's going to actually go to the database and store this information. Again, when I log in, it's going to put this information, so on and so forth. On the other aspect is, for example, sending emails. Let's say when I register, it's going to send me a welcome email. Again, this is going to be something the API is going to be able to handle. The third aspect is business logic. So let's say I am on an e-commerce website and I add stuff to my cart. And for example, I want to apply a coupon code that's going to give me 20% discount. So as well, with the API, it's going to be handling all of those implementation, the business logic there to check if, for example, the coupon code is valid, if I'm eligible to utilize this coupon code, for example, if there is the inventory for the stuff that I'm buying exists or not, or I'm able to get the delivery or not. For example, if my credit card that I'm saved to the website is valid or not. All of this information are business logic information, and all of this business logic information, they're going to help the API to perform all of the functionality that it needs to be doing. And lastly is resource management. As we know, a website is an application running on a server somewhere. Basically, it's running on a computer somewhere, and we are actually utilizing this application. So let's say, for example, we have right now 10 users using our application. The website is running smoothly. But what happens if we have a spike in our users? So we want to go from 10 to 50 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to hundreds of thousands. Who's going to be handling this? Of course, the service has certain limitation, but the application itself also needs to be able to handle all of these types of resources. So it needs to know how to optimize the request, it needs to know how to optimize the calling for the database, how to optimize the loading of the information. All of these resources, again, here I'm oversimplifying, all of this resource management needs to be happening with the backend developer. So the backend developer, although all of the work that the developer does is not actually visible to the user like the front end, but basically without it, all of the web application or the front end will not work, because the backend is a very essential part of this. So now that we have understood a very high view of what a backend application is, let us delve deep into the different languages that exist for us in order for us to develop a backend for an application. After we have understood what a backend technology is, let's see what are the languages that actually support this. And there's a lot of languages out there. Main ones are Java, .NET, Node, Python, Ruby, PHP, and Rails. All of these are very popular languages, and all of these have the right place and the right time to use. For the rest of this video, we're going to be actually focusing on the .NET stack, and basically C# inside .NET. And there's going to be a few reasons why we're going to be choosing .NET over all of the other ones. Although all of the other ones are very good frameworks, and all of them has very good support, and all of them have very good use cases, for the rest of this video we're going to be specifically focusing on .NET. So why .NET? Other than it being one of my favorite frameworks, .NET is fully built on C#. And C# is the best language or object-oriented language that exists out there for developing any type of projects or applications. Let's check in details why C# and .NET makes the perfect sense to actually develop or start learning backend development in 2022. As we can see here, with .NET we can do a lot of stuff. We can build on the cloud for Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. We can actually build web application with ASP.NET and Blazor. We can build desktop application with .NET MAUI, WPF, Windows Form, console applications. We can build mobile applications with .NET MAUI and Xamarin. We can actually build games with Unity. We can actually build IoT devices and IoT applications on ARM32 and ARM64. We can actually build AI application with ML.NET as well as Apache for .NET. Apache Spark for .NET, and all of this falls under the .NET umbrella, and all of this is supported by C#. So if we learn that language, C#, we have access to all of this. And once we understand C# and understand how it works, it's much more easier for us to move between these different technologies. So let's say, for example, I want to build my startup. And first of all, I'm going to start with a website, so I can use ASP.NET. Then I want to build a mobile application for my startup. I can use Xamarin, or I can use .NET MAUI. Once I build my mobile application, I want to build some cloud services to support this application. I can use Azure, I can use AWS, I can use Google Cloud. Once I do all of that, I want to build for example, some AI modules in order for it to analyze my data and give me predictive reasoning. I can actually utilize ML.NET and Apache Spark for that. So we can see here that the framework all fit together and the ecosystem all fit together. As well, on top of all of that, I can develop on .NET on both Windows, on Mac, and on Linux. There's nothing stopping me. Any platform or any ecosystem that I prefer, I can actually build .NET application on. On top of all of that, .NET is open source. As well, .NET is free for all. All you need to do is download the SDK on your computer and you'll be ready to go. You don't really need any fancy stuff. You can actually do it with your text editor. You can download Visual Studio Code for free. You can download Visual Studio for Mac or Visual Studio for Windows for free, community editions. On top of all of or on Linux as well. On top of all of that, there's a big community support out there as well. There's a lot of documentation, so any question that you might find or any question that you need answers to, I'm sure you can find the answer with the community out there. On top of all of that, it's very fast, it's very secure as well, it is very scalable. So all of these will make a very good candidate of why we want to actually focus on .NET and C# within 2022. When you start with .NET, I think, based on my humble opinion, learning C# is going to be one of the main things that you need to do first. Because understanding C# will unlock all of the doors that .NET have to offer. C# is the foundation block for learning .NET. It is a very easy, intuitive language to learn. It is object-oriented and it has a large community support. Currently, we are on C# 10 version, which has been released back in November. With .NET 10, with C# 10 being released, there is a lot of feature that makes our life way more easier. Specifically, if you are someone who's just getting started with C#, it's gonna make much more sense for you to just start with C# 10 right now. A lot of these features has made it much more easier for anyone to directly jump in, much more easier for anyone to understand the syntax. It removed a lot of the boilerplate code that C# used to have, and it made it very easy for anyone to just understand whatever they are writing. Once we have actually learned C# and we have learned the different fundamentals of C# and object-oriented programming, it's time for us to learn some web frameworks. But with ASP.NET, there is a lot of flavors when it comes to learning web development. There is ASP.NET MVC, there is ASP.NET Web API, there is minimal APIs, and there is Razor Pages. And if you're someone just getting started, you're gonna feel a bit confused. What does every one of these means, and which one should you choose in order for you to get started? Let's start with ASP.NET MVC, or we can say ASP.NET. ASP.NET MVC is built on the model view controller basics, which basically mean that we have separation of concerns out of the box. As well, it means that we have the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript already built in within our web applications. So for example, if we are building our applications, we have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with our backend code. So we have the front end code and we have the backend code inside the same web application. And basically what we're doing is we're creating our controllers, which basically the backend stuff, and we're creating our views, which is going to be the front end stuff, and we are putting them all in a single project, and it's much more easier for us to see all of the components of our web application. So if you're looking to easily starting with the backend development while you have experience in only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without having knowledge of any of those frameworks, ASP.NET MVC will be a good starting point. The other two, which is basically ASP.NET Web API and Minimal API, are the other aspect of these. So ASP.NET Web API and Minimal APIs, basically we don't have any HTML, JavaScript, or CSS in them. They are basically API endpoints. And basically what we have is we utilize the frameworks that we have spoke about before, which are Angular, React, and Vue.js. With those front-end framework, they communicate with these web APIs. So those frameworks will contain all of the CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. All of this logic is there in a completely separate project. While on the other hand, we have a simple project or a dedicated project for the web APIs. And you might think to yourself, okay, I have ASP.NET Web API and I have Minimal API. What's the difference between these two? So Minimal API got introduced with .NET 6. And basically a Minimal API is a stripped down version of a web API. It is much more easier. With, I think, 4 lines of code, you can actually create your first API and actually get started with it. You can take it from a proof of concept to production level environment with Minimal API. But if you want much more for enterprise environment, you can actually utilize web APIs and build from there. So now that we have covered ASP.NET Web API and Minimal API, the last one is Razor Pages. The Razor Pages is to a certain extent similar to ASP.NET MVC. In sense that it has the front end with the back end stuff in a single project together. But the difference is Razor Pages does not have the model view controller architecture. On the other hand, Razor Pages have the front end and the back end within a single page. So for example, once you write the HTML page, on the same page you actually write your back end stuff as well. It's all part of the requirements. It's all part of the developer that you want to be, and it's all part of the vision of the application that you are envisioning. There is no right or wrong scenario here when it comes to which technology and to which environment that you want to build, or which of these frameworks. You can actually choose whatever you want, and you can have a very successful web application with. I highly suggest that you can do your research on these 4, make sure which one fits with you perfectly, and then continue learning it and move forward with it. Again, once you have learned one of them, it's very easy for you to move from one to another or one to another, because basically they are all based on C# and all share the same frameworks and share all the same .NET libraries. So for example, if you build something for an MVC project as a class library, you can migrate that class library to your web API, Minimal API, or Razor Pages. It's very easy to do that because it's everything built on C#, and that's the beauty of C#. So once we have done those, let us see now some of the resources that are available for us to actually learn ASP.NET. When it comes to learning .NET and C#, there's a lot of great resources out there. The main ones that I highly suggest that you can take a look at and see if it will fit you. Basically, the first one is a video YouTube series by Scott Hanselman and Kendra Havens, where they go into C# basics. It's a very nice small videos that goes into the basics from C# Hello World all the way to creating some kind of an application with C#. It's a very good intro point to understanding C# and learning it. The other one is another video series by Scott Hanselman as well as Leslie Richardson, where they go into the basics of ASP.NET, specifically Razor Pages, and they will give you a full introduction to how you can build a web application with Razor Pages. On top of all of that, Microsoft provide a learning path where you can actually go into their learning path, choose whatever you want to learn, and they will kind of provide you all of the courses, and they're going to provide you all of the resources that you need in order for you to excel for free without paying anything, which is really good. If you want to go to the paid side, a subscription to Plural site is essential, where you can actually find all of the resources that you might need for any .NET technology that you might want. I highly recommend Kevin Dock's series and Will Green, because they cover a lot of .NET technologies from API to Blazors. As well, to learning C#, there's a very good C# course there by Scott Allen, rest in peace, where he covers all of the C#'s introduction and give you a full overview of how you utilize C# as a language. So I hope these resources will be able to help you to get jump started directly in your C# and .NET journey. All of these links will be available in the description down below. Now that we have covered basically what is front end, what is back end, the different programming path that you can take, the different technology that exists there, as well as the different careers that you can do with programming, I really hope this video helped you and it's helped you put you on track specifically with 2022. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments down below. As well, if you have any other resources that you find interesting, also please add them in the comments so other people will be able to benefit from them. Or if you have anything else that you would like me to add in the description of this video, also please let me know. Any questions also very welcome there. Again, I hope this video helped you. Please like, share and subscribe if you find this video helpful, and it will really help the channel. Happy New Year, and I really hope you'll have a very successful programming journey in this new year. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next one.